Welcome back, everybody, to the Aaron's High Cap Adventure Radio program. My gosh, what a surprise. Today, I got both attorneys in here. I got attorney extraordinaire Benton Ross Watson. I got super attorney Rick Dodd. My gosh, we're going to have a tag team. Guys, how you doing this morning?
We are unreasonably close here in the studio, ladies and gentlemen.
Good hygiene is very important. When you watch this on YouTube, you get to see it.
It's good to be here.
I had asked the question of, well, first of all, we all do pot in this office here. Okay, we're all doing pot all the time, every day. Pot is perception of threat, P-O-T, perception of threat. And so I was asking these gentlemen here, okay, a person who's being assaulted, aggressed upon, or whatever, has a perception of the threat. And then if it has to go to court, the court's going to look at it and maybe possibly see a different perception of threat, one that may be equal to what you saw, less than what you saw, I don't know, maybe even more than what you saw. So I wanted to have a discussion about that, and these guys are armed and ready to talk about it. So guys, why don't you hit it?
I went to law school because I couldn't stand lawyers, so I usually have a different perception than every lawyer in there is also what the law is. But you start from the standpoint of, what is the legal standard? And the legal standard is going to tell us basically what perception is, and that's whoever's looking at the trial, whatever they want to believe is what their perception is. And so the standard says reasonably believes the force is immediately necessary to protect the actor against the other's use or attempted use of force or deadly force, and depending on which situation it is. So reasonably believes, okay, is one ambiguous phrase, and then you have immediately necessary is the other vague, ambiguous
we've discussed that word
phrase.
Before, yeah.
Okay, and so I think that what is perceived as reasonably believed, okay, and then immediately necessary is an objective subjective standard or a subjective objective standard that's almost impossible to predict or for me to tell somebody what they should do in a self-defense situation. But we know, and I've talked about the Hamill case on here. If anybody's a routine listener, that's where
They're all routine listeners.
Yeah, well, I mean, some people have other things to do in their life. But anyway, but if you missed the Hamill case, it's just basically an ex-boyfriend comes over while a guy's trying to help the girl move out because he's a domestic violence perpetrator. The boyfriend was, and the guys, tell him, please leave. You're causing a scene, and he says, well, I got a gun in the truck, and if you don't calm down, I'm gonna show you how I can use it. And then the guy kind of leaves. Well, the dude that's helping the girl move is worried that the guy's going to go get his gun in the car and kind of runs up behind him and stabs him several times so that he can't get to the car.
Sounds like a reasonable perception to me.
Well, it was a strange case. I love this case because it goes up on appeal. He loses in the trial court because the trial court denies him a self-defense instruction. They don't allow him to use the defense of self-defense because there wasn't any evidence that the violent perpetrator boyfriend actually used force against him or was attempting to use force. It was simply leaving. But it's not about what that evidence is. It's about what your belief is.
Yeah, because the definition, as you read, is the actor, his belief.
The actor's belief. And so that's what I'm saying. You're asking the jury to decide what a reasonable person, but in the actor's position, might do. And he had an apparent belief that the individual was a dangerous person, and there was evidence that he was a dangerous person. He had made somewhat of a threat, and then he took some sort of substantial step. I mean, some kind of action, right, that would have given that apparent belief some kind of credibility. And so I don't know that he would have won, but he definitely should have been given a self-defense claim. And so I just start from that standpoint. And then I'm sure Rick's going to jump in here and give us a whole bunch of good circumstances. But then you've asked me several times, and you always ask me these ridiculous questions.
But it's funny you say that. You know how many people say that? Where do you come up with these questions? I go, I just have an active mind, man.
Well, all the cases that we see are so different. I mean, in every case you look at is ridiculous. That's why it went to the appellate court.
Right.
Wait. The other reason why I ask these crazy questions, because ever since you guys come on the show, I start realizing that black and white law that we're looking at is twisted, and it's not black and white, it's gray.
Yeah, and that is true, and it's because right. It's a lot of this is going to be fact intensive based on perception, and so you ask me, well, what would a person be able to do this if he didn't have a gun? We talked about Big Lou, my buddy, biggest guy in the NCAA at one time, right? If he doesn't have a gun, does that mean that somebody else necessarily couldn't use a gun? I think that it may be reasonable under some circumstances for a 5 foot nothing guy that's does never been involved in any kind of violence, if he's going up against Big Lou, to use a weapon, right? Considering a weapon, Big Lou was shot as a bodyguard and still didn't kill him. Okay, and so yeah, you look. What is the size of the person? What are the circumstances? Is it a home? Is it a highway? Is it a bar? Right? What's the location?
Let
the
me
timing?
read this list real quick because this is kind
Before
of
we
what we
do
go.
that, let me speak to what he just said. We talked about perceptions, and what we got to realize that every single person has different perceptions about everything. I mean, our perceptions are based on and come out of our life experiences. So someone who has a life experience of growing up in a rural situation is going to have a different life experience than someone growing up, say, in the inner city.
Yeah,
I'll
definitely.
give you an example. I do civil law, of course, and Ross does criminal law, but in my civil law practice, we do things like, well, when we go to different jurisdictions. For instance, I had a case, truck wreck case in south of Dallas, where my person was driving and they wouldn't do anything wrong. They're sitting at a stop sign, but they had a little bit of marijuana in their pocket. So, they found out about it, and for reasons I didn't get in early enough, that was going to be admissible. So we were really worried about that. So we did some focus groups in South Dallas, and we found out that the juries there just didn't really care. I mean, so what? So we had a little pot in his pocket. Big deal. Then I had one almost exact same circumstances up in North Dallas, up in the Plano area. We did focus groups there, and we learned that, hey, we better do something quick because the jury is going to kick us because he had some pot in his pocket.
I'm actually glad. I do some civil stuff too, not as big time cases like that, but Rick does do state planning stuff like that. But from Rick's point, I'm glad he's here because I was actually going to mention, people don't know this, but a lot of times the pharmaceutical companies, medical equipment companies, other commercial entities, oftentimes either get sued or they anticipate a suit in a certain location, and what they'll do is they'll go and have mock jury trials in the location to see what the local perception is.
Wow.
Based on if people don't know this. See, in a lot of it, I'm sorry, this is my opinion. A lot of the legal system, in my opinion, is a con. Okay, and a lot of the politics.
I look at it as a well-planned trial.
I'm not saying the whole thing, but there are a lot of things that are based on selling points. Okay, and so they figure out what is going to be their perception, and they find. Well, I mean, look at jury consultants. That's why jury consultants get paid so much money. Okay, from both sides, and nothing from either side. Defense firms use.
But it's like a divorce, Ross. It's because it's worth it.
Yes, okay, I know. Yeah, that's my got a lawyer used to say, "Why is divorce so expensive?" And the person say, "Why?" I say, "Because it's worth it." But you have these jury consultants because everybody has their own basis of experiences, and that's why what was the big thing with standardized testing, right? And minorities. That's why you have these advocacy groups that say. They don't feel like standardized testing are fair to minorities because the whole test is built from people with a different set of backgrounds, and they don't read the test the same. They don't have the same type of language structure, and so that's kind of the same thing. It's like he said with the two groups that he had in North and South Texas. So you're going to have different groups, just like different squirrels over the time.
Whenever I say
evolution.
the word bathroom, in our mind, a bathroom flashes. It's probably the bathroom that we grew up with. So it may look a whole lot different than your bathroom and your bathroom, so it's all a little bit different, even though it's the same thing. So you were fixing to say something about...
Well, I just wanted to give the audience out there a concept idea of what we talk about in the class as what is perception of threat. The justification for the use of force is based on perception, and common elements that need to be analyzed before using force is the number, size of attackers, gender, Are there innocent bystanders around? What's the location that you're in? What kind of weapons being used? Mental states, a perceived state of mind. Is there a lesser force option? Do you have alternatives available? What offense was actually committed? Is there a verbal dialogue going on? Body language. I do a lot with body language. Clothing, gang members, colors. Is there any special skills? Somebody injured? If so, where are they located? How important is it to get them help? So there's all these different things you can look at that comes up to a perception of the threat, which may make you do one thing as compared to another.
So a lot of these perceptions for each individual comes into their life experience through television, through magazines, through newspapers. And a
Right.
typical example is, imagine a criminal, and all of a sudden, there's these face shots that you see in the newspaper. It's your perception because that's your life experience.
You basically said it, but I was going to talk about an article too, recent published in by the Irish Republic newspaper or whatever. But it said that it's talking about the internet and jury trials and how the internet has been affecting jury's perceptions. There's been several jury trials overturned in Ireland based on internet influence, and so
You got a call coming in? All right, let's take it. Let's see if this is pertaining to what we're talking about here. This is Matt. You're on the High Cap Adventure Radio program. Who are we talking to?
I just don't think Rick's mic is working. Can't hear Rick.
All right.
Okay, we'll turn the mic back up.
How's that? Is that better?
Talk.
Is that better?
All right.
Got a delay. All right, we'll check it out. We'll make sure we
Thank
work on
you.
it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. You know what
Okay.
you're saying?
yeah. So I'm also glad that you talked about hearing noises outside and things like that. I was actually, too. So I know a girl that her car broke down between Milano and Cameron, and it's pretty late, and she called her parents and said, "Hey, my car's broke down," but then her phone went dead, and so her parents knew, and it was going to take some time, but they were going to come. And in the meantime, a car stops and a guy gets out and kind of starts, walking around the car. She didn't have her flashers on, didn't have her lights on. It was just she just pulled over waiting, and so she felt like her life was about to end.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and she's telling me about this. You can hear her fear in the story, and she jumps in the back and puts a bunch of clothes and blankets over her, so the guy didn't, see. Well, a family drives up, and the guy suspiciously leaves automatically, and so that was a suspicious circumstance. But what if she would have used force there? I mean, to her, that really felt like a threatening situation. But if she'd have killed that guy, right, you'd be looking at like, he didn't do anything.
I do this example in my class all the time. I say there's me, and I find the most petite, smallest person in the class. And I say we both got the same exact gun with the same number of bullets in them, okay, cartridges in them. And there's twin brothers, and they're 300 pounds, and that twin brother A wants to rape her, twin brother B wants to rape me, okay? They're 24 feet away.
Right.
She empties 17 rounds at 24 feet, and I do the same thing. And the question is, who's going to jail? And everybody goes, me. It's because I'm bigger, I'm more experienced, I could probably handle the situation better, whereas she's petite, freaking out, and so her perception of the threat was 17 rounds at 24 feet. So you're right. It all depends on that person's
And I'm
perception.
glad you talked, because I was going to mention one article, and it says, "How reasonable is the reasonable man?" That's the name of the article. It's talking about police and excessive force. I'm glad you talked about the police version this morning, but
I'm glad I could set you up.
yeah, you did. It was like kind of like the telepathy here, but the thing about this is there's a lot of statistics in this case. Okay, I mean in this study and in this journal that's a case study about all of these studies. But as a general standpoint, I'm just going to briefly summarize. Yes, there's sort of possibly some a lot of bias that goes into it. And this was actually written from a police standpoint. He's actually advocating for the police in here, and he says yes, there may be some a higher group of minorities getting an unnecessary force. There may be some bias on the part of the police, but the standard of self-defense, what is reasonably necessary or what is reasonable under the circumstances, has been misconstrued under legal standards, and it's almost unreasonable because he says what has become reasonable has now become what is necessary. And I'm not advertising. I'm not intentionally advertising for you, but I was really getting into this article, and it talked about, you know, situations where there's intentional police violence, or whether police really know what they're doing. It may not be intentional. They know that they're being excessive, and they know or they knew they're having a bad day, and they just go do it anyway. And then there's just unnecessary violence, which is trying to get to a justified end, an outcome that is for a valid purpose, but they rushed into it because they're incompetent, because they weren't trained, and they didn't know how to use the situation. And they go into all these factors about why it's important for training. And so I think that's why this show is so good, because I think everybody should take advantage of the training from you. And I think that they people like you, or you, and they need to know how to use their weapon, and how to assess the circumstance, because that's going to make them more able, okay, to be able to claim reasonableness in the situation. And they're not going to panic and say, or feel like they're not confident in themselves, right, to be able to use force. If they're confident, right, they're going to be more calm-headed, right, and more assertive, and more,
The more trained you are,
right.
the more time you have. The more time you have, the more options you have. And one of those options may be never having to draw your weapon in the first place. So that's where good training comes in.
Right, and that's what this article is saying.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't say that these police officers should be prosecuted, right? Because maybe they're a little bit incompetent, right? In every case, like maybe there's some cases. I'm sure there's exceptions to every rule, right? Even this one, right, is the exception to the. Never mind.
Well, they are human, and we know that humans make mistakes.
Exactly, and so that's what the article is saying. And so you never know who's going to find your mistake as a reasonable mistake, right? Or one that is a necessary mistake, or whether the mistake was in circumstances that were immediately necessary. And so that's why you do want to know what you're doing. You do want to take care of yourself. And actually, I'm going to say right here, if 4 other people want to take Matt's class, okay, on the tactical, what is the one that we were talking about? That you were taking?
Self-defense home invasion seminar.
Home invasion seminar. If 4 other people want to take it, right, I will pay $50 each on their fee if they want to join me. So if you want to join, call them. I want to do it, and I'll pay. I don't know how much it is exactly. You're telling me it's way more expensive than probably what it's worth. But I want to do it. I think it's a good deal. He's got lawyer prices, folks. But
I learned something from it.
I think so. So if you want to do it, I encourage you to do that, and I want to do it with you. And so I'll pay $50 towards your fee. I would go do it, but he says I got to have 5 people, and I don't have that many friends. So I think if you want to, holler at Matt. If you want to holler at me, Benton at Watson.legal. Benton at Watson.legal.
Well, whatever it costs to be worth it, because ultimately it's fun, but it could save your life, and
And I
spend
think
a lot of money for that.
It's like estate and business planning. When I do this kind of stuff, I try to tell them you need to do this stuff. Yes, there are several things that might not happen, but you're going to increase your growth and your wealth and your confidence. And if you have your confidence, you're not going to be subject or a slave to fear. And so I think that the more confident you are going into situations is always better. And I think that that's going to help determine your perception of fear, because you're not going to be, subject to your own fears.
So one of the subjects you talked about was the perception then that the jury might have.
Yes.
And I would comment that that's the reason that we had 12 people on the jury, because all 12 of those people are going to have different life experiences. So the hope is that when you have 12 people come together to make a decision based on the facts, in other words, the facts of what happened in the altercation, where you have someone who took someone else's life, and the question is whether it was reasonable, whether they were justified, that some of those 12 people would have very similar feelings and would see the circumstances as they were, as opposed to one person who may have grown up in a different area with a different lifestyle and had completely different life experiences.
Isn't there a common thread, though, that even if people, you always get this story, you got the prosecuting attorney getting his people on the jury, you got the defense attorney getting their people on the jury, but isn't there, when it comes to this, a common link between the prosecutor and the defender jurors that sees it as just basic self-defense? It always seems like there's this political twist on things.
Well, I mean, the grand jury looks at it and sees if there's enough evidence to prosecute in the first place to go ahead and charge an individual. And your idea about the jury selection is really a deselection. In other words, generally speaking, when there's a 12-person panel, each side gets 6 strikes. But during the process, say for instance it's a trial about rape, if there's someone who's been a victim on the jury panel, they probably would be what we call struck for cause. In other words, the judge would make a decision that that person could not be unbiased or unprejudiced because of their terrible life experience.
You know what's weird about that? You get somebody who has been raped to judge on a case of rape, and somebody says that may be unbiased, but then you got the person who's never been raped and may come up with a conclusion that is nowhere as close to the fear that that person who got raped had.
Well,
So-
I agree. That's
So everybody needs to be,
I was told that if you have a panel of peers in your DWI case, they should all be drunk. So that's something to be said about that, right?
Yeah, I guess. Well, I'll tell you, look, we got about 5 minutes left here. I don't know if you still want to go on this particular part of it, but I also had here what happens after a shooting. I thought we could maybe give an idea, if you are involved in a shooting, what's probably going to happen in the legal process. For example, I got notes here. You'll probably be arrested or some form of degree, possible criminal charges, appearing before a grand jury, possible trial, possible punishment. Is there anything you can add to that or talk about to give people an idea of what they're in store for?
Yeah, Ross, I'm sure you've handled some of that, so you want to lay it on us?
Yeah, I mean, what kind of shooting? Does the person die?
I don't know, brother. It's all depending on each particular case.
Okay, so John Reddington was in here about a couple weeks ago, and we heard him talk about the man who shot out the back of the window. I don't think he was arrested on the spot. Okay, but they did present an indictment, and it got no billed.
Explain what the term is.
So an indictment, if you get a misdemeanor, what they're going to do is they're probably going to charge you. You may or may not get arrested at the beginning, but let's say that you get arrested and then you get out of jail. Well, they're just going to go file a complaint, and then they'll file another complaint or what's called an information. Okay, and that's your formal charge, and then you're just going to get a letter telling you to show up to court. You're not really going to know about the filing of the formal document, that's the formal charging document. If you have a felony involved, like if you shoot somebody, okay, what's going to happen is you may or may not be arrested in the situation. A lot of people don't, honestly, on the felony cases. A lot more on the felony cases don't get arrested. What they'll do is they'll have evidence on it, and they'll present that to the grand jury. Most of the time, in 90% of the cases, you're never going to know when they present it to the grand jury. They're going to present it. The grand jurors are going to decide, is there probable cause to arrest you, to go forward with prosecution.
Why is somebody getting arrested with a shot out window, but in most cases, from what you just said, unless I misunderstood you, they don't get arrested if they shoot somebody? What did I miss there?
Well, the police may think there's a really good claim of self-defense, or like it's just a weak case, they're not really sure, and or they haven't directly caught the person. It's not like a traffic stop where they stopped them, the drugs are right there in the console, and boom, they arrest them.
Okay.
It's more like an investigation. We think that this person is running a child pornography ring because we have this person, we arrested him for child pornography, and he said he got it from this guy, and this guy said it was being filtered out through this computer system, and this computer system has this IP address, and the IP address is owned by somebody at this house address, and this house address is owned by this person.
Gotcha.
But there's 4 people that live in that house. But based on other evidence, we think it's this guy. So what they do, they may not arrest anybody because they don't want to go arrest somebody, make a big deal about it, and then be wrong, right, and get no bill. So they'll just present that evidence to the grand jury, get the grand jury to indict, right, say that there is probable cause, or the grand jurors may say, dude, you don't have anything. There's 4 people in that house, and I know his brother. His brother's just as much of a POS as he is. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so if you're not sure, right, we're not going to indict. So what they'll do is they'll no bill. Okay, and if they no bill, the prosecutor is not barred from going forward again. They just got to go get a little bit more evidence, and then they can come back and try to get them later. And so you may or may not know that they're doing a formal charging document, but if you get indicted, you need to go talk to a lawyer at once.
And nobody else.
Okay, if you think that you're involved in a shooting where somebody you actually shot somebody. Again, I try to be a reasonable person, okay, and I try to follow the ethical rules. All right, you got to be careful not to waive your Fifth Amendment right, okay, but at the same time, cooperating with police is not necessarily a bad thing, okay. But I don't mind saying it. If you think you did wrong, okay, keep your mouth shut.
Absolutely shit.
I have you guys on the speed dial. Okay, just in case.
I mean, but you need to, and it's not fair a lot of times because a lot of people have never been in trouble at all, or never been in a bad situation, and so like a really bad situation. So a lot of times they do things that makes them look guilty. Mm-hmm. Okay, even though right that they're not guilty. Like a lot of times that they'll try to hide the body, right? This happens. I mean, this happens.
Really,
This happens. People try to hide. Right, the circumstances they think nobody's going to believe me.
And
right?
then once they do that, that's a big sign of guilt.
So don't do that. Okay, that does not help you.
And
right?
if you do get arrested and your wife comes to visit, you don't talk about what you've been arrested for because all that's being recorded.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah.
I'll tell you what, gentlemen, we got to wrap it up. Why don't you finalize what it is? Tell everybody how they can get a hold of you. Parting thoughts. Go ahead.
Well, I'm Rick Dodd. You can contact us down at Capilano, Dodd and Krebs on 312 South Houston here in Camry. Everybody knows where we are. Been there 35 years.
Benton Watson here in Cameron. That's my main office location, 105 East Main Street. It's got the big milk cow on the side. You can contact me at 254-605-4140. It's 605-4140. Or hit me up on the email, benton@watson.legal. That's benton@watson.legal.
And this is Aaron's High Cap Adventure radio program, and we're right here at 105.1 FM, KMIL, and KRXT at 98.5. Check us out. We'll see you on the other side of the break. Guys, I can't thank you enough for being on. It was great.
Thanks, our listeners. Thanks.
Good job.